Alrighty, everyone. Maren Morris has released her third official studio album, Humble Quest, and it is time to talk about it. At this point in time, I don't think Maren is a stranger to anyone. How could she be with two number one albums and 9 top 10 singles within the span of like 3 or 4 years? Ever since breaking through in 2016 with My Church and 80s Mercedes, Maren has been one of the most present female forces in the world of mainstream country music, as well as making a name for herself in the general music sphere thanks to collaborations with artists like Zedd and Grey back in 2018. But even within country music, Maren has always been one to bounce around. Her debut and sophomore album, Hero and Girl respectively, were very much mainstream pop country. Everything felt like it was made with the intention of being a big radio hit, always searching for the big sound, the snappiest hook, the most widely relatable idea. And though she found that hit on a few occasions, it didn't mean the music itself was that good. The bulk of it just felt pretty uninspired and more desperate for success than anything. Her first 2 albums were pretty mediocre for me, specifically Girl. My whole view on that record will forever be tainted by 2 major things. One being the bones. This might be the most overplayed song I've heard. It was like she had hired a gang to hold every radio station at gunpoint, forcing them to play this song every 20 minutes. It was disgusting, and the song itself isn't even that good. I never want to hear it again. And second, the album Girl is responsible for the most egregious award show robbery I can think of. Granted, the robbery was emphasized by the fact that everything other than Desperate Man was undeserving, but simply because it won, Girl has become my punching bag from that era. Also, as I just said, I just didn't enjoy the album that much in the first place. But then Maren came back as a member of the Highwomen, who dropped their incredible self-titled album later in 2019. What I liked about that album was it gave me a chance to hear Maren in a completely different environment, under a much more traditional light, and it made me reevaluate. Then, of course, the pandemic hit, she got mad at Morgan Wallen, and we had to suffer through that painful clash of fan bases that is still going on to this day. Y'all really gotta put that to rest, by the way. Then, right at the very beginning of the year, she began dropping singles and teasers for this album, which eventually arrived pretty much 3 years to the day after Girl way back in 2019. Leading up to this album, I was just super interested to see how Maren had changed over these last few years, the growth personally and artistically. Plainly put, after seeing her potential as a member of the Highwomen, I was hoping for a new and different chapter that would display some improvement and progression, and for the most part, that's what this album brings. Right from the opening track and lead single, Circles Around This Town, the songwriting just provides a lot more to read into. It's Maren singing from her current position as a superstar, looking back and recounting her journey to get where she is today, letting us in on what her everyday life looked like as she busted her butt trying to make ends meet while chasing this dream of being a musician. I love when she references both My Church and 80s Mercedes in the second verse. It just makes the song feel so much more personal. This isn't just anyone's journey as a songwriter, it's specific to her. It's Maren saying, this is what my experience was, and I find that perspective significantly more interesting. Scattered throughout this album, Maren returns to this journey being the central theme of the album, like the title track Humble Quest, which is a very tasteful anthemic tune about pushing forward. Rather than looking back, this song sees Maren focused on the present and looking forward as she continues on this humble quest of not only growing as a musician and celebrity, but as a person and how she's still maturing. But even when she's not directly talking about this quest, there's imagery and metaphors all over this record alluding to ideas of travel, movement, progression, like the song Detour, which also features one of the most infectious hooks on the whole album. Outside of personal growth and exploration, Maren also devotes a lot of attention to her husband and the impact he's had on her life, the part he's played in getting her to where she is today, sharing a variety of emotions in a number of different ways. You've got songs like The Furthest Thing, which talks about the toll touring has on a relationship and the struggles that arise from going weeks without seeing your significant other. Background Music, which is by far one of my favorite tracks, sees Maren pondering how the world is going to remember the two of them, because right now they're perfectly human, living a life and using music to leave an imprint on the world around them, but as time goes on, they themselves will most likely be forgotten, but Maren's hoping their music will remain as a reminder, even if it's just softly playing as background music. There's also more lighthearted and fun romantic cuts like Tall Guys, which has to be one of the funniest songs of the year so far, saying things like we fly first class because it's the only way his knees fit. They may not see eye to eye, but a different perspective is all right. It really does rub off well. It's also finished with some nice, sassy, suggestive production that really brings it all home for me. But beyond the very grounded and engaging lyrical concepts, what I was arguably most impressed by was the production, because while it can be a little spotty at times as far as mixing is concerned, I really like how on this record Maren tries to focus on a consistent sound, but also an original one. The sound of this record is pretty one-to-one and distinct in a good way. As I said earlier, Maren is no stranger to incorporating other genres into her music, but it all just comes together so much more seamlessly on Humble Quest. I'm not suggesting this is by any stretch a very country album, but it's an interesting album, featuring sounds and production that's worth giving a try, something I can't particularly say for her earlier output, which was much more run-of-the-mill corporate pop country. There's shades of rock, shades of country, hints of indie and pop, but it all finds a common ground in an alternative space, comparable to something like the Luke Hemmings record from last year. From front to back, the record feels very murky, the acoustics are a little muddier than you'd expect, the pianos have a little more of a ripple to them, the percussion is much thinner and dry, which contrasts nicely with the dampness of the rest of the instrumentals. It is personal taste, and I can see how some people would find it a little too mute, but for me, I think on the whole, for the most part, it works. One thing I adore on this record is the harmonies. They really help add a lot of juice to some of the more reserved songs, just giving them the extra push to avoid blending into the rest. They often bring a great sense of companionship, like on the song Detour, which is just built for singing along to. I already know that's going to be right there on any road trip playlist I make this summer. On Detour, there's also some great steel in the bridge, as well as the driving yet mute percussion that helps keep the song moving the whole time. Back on the topic of harmonies though, one wholesome addition I enjoyed was how Ryan Hurd is the background vocalist for the majority of the love songs here, almost making them a duet, but just not quite. It's just a personal touch that when identified adds a little more character to the LP. Hummingbird is another interesting one on the production side. It's much more acoustic and folky, but it seems to carry some twisted undertones. The airiness makes space for some eeriness to creep in the back door. It's got a cool little intro featuring a child's voice that feels like something off the latest Adele record. The whole album is set in this very murky state. Musically, it does give off similar vibes to the cover of the album. On the whole, it's a little heavier, a little more enigmatic, a little more ominous, but if this album feels like the murky lagoon the cover image is set in, then background music is the point where you reach a wall of vines, pull them back, and are met by a grand, majestic, palatial tavern with waterfalls and glowing plants. For me, it's just the most captivating, breathtaking moment on the entire record. The way the distant guitars really just open up in the chorus, the hook is bluesy, it's entrancing. The whole thing just feels so theatrical, and it's also constantly building right up until the final chorus where Maren just lets it go with one of her best vocals on the entire album. That song alone is like 10 times the experience anything from her first two albums was able to offer. The only song that feels slightly out of line with its colleagues is the third track, I Can't Love You Anymore, which, while it's by no means one of the strongest moments on the album, I do think there is some value to this song, but it's definitely more outspoken in its pop country production, giving me similar vibes to Kelsey Ballerini's Hole in the Bottle. And then the last song I want to mention is the closer, What Would This World Do? It's just so pretty, so soft, feels very reminiscent of John Mayer's You're Gonna Live Forever in Me, both of which I absolutely adore. I just had to shout that song out. Though my complaints are minimal, they are still there. Although I do like the production choices on this record, and I really approve of the experimentation, there are times where the instrumentals can feel a little washed out, a little too low-key, just walking the line of being subtly pretty or a mishmash of sound. I just think there were some spots where the instrumentals could have been tightened up a little bit, a little less reverb, a little less space. I also wish lyrically Maren focused a little more on her journey as a musician. I would have loved to hear more about her personal feelings on stuff like touring, promotion, the celebrity life, and how that impacts her, not just her relationship with Ryan Hurd, because Ryan does get the spotlight quite a bit on this record. I just think there's other events and ideas she could have snuck on here that would have really brought this thing over the edge thematically. Things like the birth of her new child and how that and her musician life could potentially butt heads at some point. Just stuff like that I think really would have added some more dimension to the album. But overall, I really like this thing. In my opinion, it is far superior to Maren's other albums. I think it's a really strong showing and really has me interested to see where Maren goes next. Is she going to take 3 more years off? Are the Highwomen going to make a comeback this year? Who knows, but whatever it looks like, I am on board. Rating-wise, I'm going to give this album a solid 8, like an 8.5 out of 10. And that is all I've got for you guys today. Be sure to let me know what you thought of this album in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed. If you're new, maybe consider subscribing for more country music content. Links to my Instagram, Discord, and podcast are all down below in the description. Be sure to check those out. And yeah, until next time, I hope y'all have a great day.